She picked up both frames, feeling the weight of the years between them. The cleaning uniform in the photo was identical to the one now hanging in the break room, reminding everyone that respect wasn't earned by titles or suits, but by how you treated others. Her phone buzzed, a message from Robert in accounting about next quarter's projections. The numbers were good, but that wasn't what made Rose smile. It was the photo he'd attached of the cleaning staff's graduation ceremony from their business skills program. As she gathered her things to leave, Rose paused at her office window. The cleaning crew was arriving for their evening shift, but instead of slipping in through back doors, they walked proudly through the main entrance, greeted by name by other employees heading home. 5 years ago, she'd shown the world that the most powerful person in the room might be the one they least expected. But her real legacy wasn't just in proving them wrong, it was in creating a place where such proof was no longer needed. Because in the end, true power wasn't about who sat in the biggest office or drew the highest salary. It was about creating a world where everyone's contribution was valued, where every voice was heard, and where the person pushing the cleaning cart today might be running the company tomorrow. That was Rose Washington's real legacy, not just cleaning up a company, but showing the world a better way to build one. 5 years had passed since the day a cleaning lady changed the face of corporate America. Rose Washington stood at the podium of the National Business Leadership Conference, looking out at a sea of eager faces. The story of how she transformed Sterling Communications had become legend in business circles, taught in universities, and featured in countless books. People often ask me what success looks like, Rose began, her voice carrying the same quiet confidence she developed during 15 years of careful observation. They expect to hear about our doubled profits, our industry awards, or our top ranking in employee satisfaction surveys. But true success isn't measured in numbers alone. She clicked her presentation remote, and the screen behind her showed a split image. On one side, the old Sterling Communications boardroom filled with identical suits and ties. On the other, today's diverse leadership team that reflected the real world outside their windows. 5 years ago, I was pushing a cleaning cart through corporate hallways, watching a company slowly lose its soul in pursuit of profit. Today, I'm here to tell you that doing the right thing isn't just morally correct, it's good business. The audience leaned forward as Rose shared the real numbers behind their transformation. Employee turnover had dropped by 80%. Innovation had skyrocketed, with ideas now flowing from every level of the company. The Minority Outreach Division, once targeted for outsourcing, had become their most profitable department. But it was the personal stories that really captured attention. Rose told them about Paula, a former cleaning staff member who'd become a successful project manager through their education program. About Talminette, whose suggestion for improving client communications had saved the company millions. About young graduates who chose Sterling over bigger companies because they knew their voices would be heard. After her speech, Rose walked through the conference center, stopping every few steps as people approached to share their own stories. A young woman in a maintenance uniform asked for a photo, explaining that Rose's story had inspired her to start taking business classes at night. Back at the office, Rose found her daughter waiting in the lobby. Andre had finished medical school and now ran the company's employee health clinic. "Ready for the anniversary celebration, Mom?" she asked, hugging Rose. The main conference room had been transformed for the occasion. 5 years ago, it had been the scene of her confrontation with James Sterling II. Today, it was filled with employees from every department, gathered to celebrate how far they'd come. Charlie, now head of security, clinked his glass for attention. "I remember the day Miss Rose walked in wearing a business suit instead of her cleaning uniform," he said, grinning. The look on Sterling's face was priceless. But what happened after, that's the real story. Rose looked around the room as others shared their memories. The cleaning staff sat mixed in with executives, everyone dressed in their best clothes, but all treating each other as equals. The old hierarchies had melted away, replaced by a culture of mutual respect. Betty Chen raised her glass. "To Rose Washington, who taught us that sometimes the best way to clean up a company is from the ground up." Later that evening, Rose took her customary walk through the office. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She passed the wall of photos in the lobby, no longer just corporate awards, but real moments of human connection. staff birthdays, community events, families at company picnics. Near her office, she stopped to chat with a new hire who was staying late to finish a project. The young woman explained that she'd chosen Sterling over several other offers because of their reputation for valuing every employee's contribution. "You know," the young woman said, "my mother was a cleaner too. When I told her I got a job here, she cried. She said your story showed her that her daughter could do anything." Rose smiled, remembering her own parents' sacrifices. "Tell your mother something for me," she said. "Tell her that dignity isn't in what job you do, it's in how you do it." In her office, Rose found a surprise on her desk, a framed photo from her first day as a cleaner at Sterling Communications, standing proudly in her blue uniform. Next to it sat her latest business award, Most Innovative Corporate Culture Transformation. Before heading home, Rose stopped by her old supply closet, now converted into a small break room for the facilities team. On the wall hung a framed blue uniform, her old cleaning uniform. Below it was a simple plaque that read, "Never forget where you came from or who helped you get to where you are." As she left the building, she passed a young woman mopping the lobby floor. Their eyes met, and Rose saw something there she recognized: determination, intelligence, and maybe a hint of a bigger dream. She smiled and nodded, wondering if perhaps history had a way of repeating itself in the most unexpected ways. After all, real change didn't happen overnight. Sometimes it took 15 years of pushing a cleaning cart, watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment to show that the most powerful person in the room might just be the one with the mop. 6 months had passed since the day Rose Washington stepped out of the shadows and into the spotlight. The changes at Sterling Communications were visible the moment you walked through the front doors. The company's name remained the same. Rose had decided that changing the future was more important than erasing the past. The lobby, once cold and imposing with its marble floors and stark white walls, now displayed artwork from local artists. The security desk, where Charlie still worked his shift, had become a warm welcome point rather than a barrier. And most notably, the cleaning staff now worked during daylight hours, treated as valued members of the team rather than invisible shadows. Rose sat in her office, reviewing the latest company reports with her new board of directors. The glass walls of the conference room were frosted for privacy, but she'd insisted on keeping one section clear. A reminder to never lose sight of what happened in the corridors of power. "Our employee satisfaction scores are up 60%, Lisa reported. She'd been promoted from the Minority Outreach Division to head of Human Resources, and job applications have tripled since we announced the new mentorship program." Robert from accounting, now the CFO, pulled up another chart. "We've actually saved money by bringing the cleaning services in-house and providing full benefits. Turns out, treating people well is good for business." Rose nodded, remembering her own days of pushing a cleaning cart through these holes. "And how's the new training program going?" Betty Chen, who'd stayed on as chief legal counsel, smiled. "The Every Voice Matters initiative has been picked up by 3 other major companies. They want to know how we transformed our corporate culture so quickly." The truth was, the transformation hadn't been quick at all. It had taken 15 years of careful observation, of learning what really made a company work, not just the numbers on spreadsheets, but the people behind them. Rose excused herself from the meeting and took a walk through the office. She did this every day now, but not with a cleaning cart. She stopped at desks, chatted with employees, listened to their ideas and concerns. The nervous energy that had once filled the building had been replaced by something else: hope. In the break room, she found a group of interns having lunch with their mentors. One young woman was excitedly sharing her ideas for improving client outreach. Her mentor, a senior executive, was taking notes. 6 months ago, that scene would have been unimaginable. "Mrs. Washington," a voice called out. It was Denny from the maintenance team, rushing up with a tablet in hand. "Remember that idea we talked about last week? About setting up a small business incubator for our cleaning staff's side projects? Well, I did some research." Rose listened as Denny outlined his proposal. Under the old leadership, someone in his position would never have dared to approach the CEO. But that was the whole point of the changes she'd made, breaking down the invisible barriers that kept good ideas from being heard. Later that afternoon, Rose had a video call with a group of business students. They'd been studying the company's transformation as part of their corporate ethics class. One student asked the question she'd heard 100 times before. Why did you spend 15 years as a cleaner when you could have bought your way into power? Rose leaned back in her chair, looking out at the city skyline. Power isn't just about having money or authority, she explained. It's about understanding the heart of what you're trying to change. I needed to see how decisions made in this office affected the people on every floor, from the mailroom to the boardroom. After the call, Rose walked to the wall where Sterling's awards used to hang. They'd been replaced by photographs, employees at community service events, graduation ceremonies from the company's new education program, families at the daycare center she'd opened in the building. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter. "Mom, you're trending again." The interview about the mentorship program went viral. Rose smiled, remembering how her own parents had taught her that no honest work was beneath her dignity. Now she was teaching a new generation that no position of power was beyond their reach. The sun was setting over the city as she finished her day. The cleaning crew, now called the facilities management team, was starting their evening shift. Each of them wore name badges now, and employees greeted them by name as they passed. Rose picked up a framed photo from Sterling's desk, him shaking hands with celebrities at charity galas, always positioned to face the camera. She replaced it with a photo of her own family, including her children and her parents, who had taught her the value of honest work. Legacies aren't built on photo ops, she said, straightening the frame. They're built on the choices we make when we think nobody's watching. Looking out at the evening skyline one more time, Rose thought about tomorrow. There would be more meetings, more decisions, more changes to make. But for now, she had one more thing to do. She walked to the cleaning supply closet, pulled out a familiar blue uniform, and hung it carefully in what was now her private bathroom. To remind me, she explained to Betty's questioning look, that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one they don't see at all. The hours following the shareholders' meeting felt like a whirlwind. News crews gathered in the lobby, their cameras flashing as security escorted James Sterling IE from the building. He left the same way Rose had entered thousands of times, through the service entrance, head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone he passed. Rose sat in what had been Sterling's office, looking out over the city skyline she'd cleaned windows to for 15 years. The view felt different from this side of the glass. Betty Chen was beside her, coordinating with the legal team as they processed the day's events. "The other board members are scrambling," Betty reported, hanging up her phone. 3 have already resigned. The rest are practically begging to keep their positions. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Charlie, the security guard, with a group of nervous-looking employees from the Minority Outreach Division. "Sorry to bother you, Miss Rose, Mrs. Washington," he corrected himself with a grin. But these folks wanted to know if their jobs were really safe. Rose stood up, remembering how many times she'd seen similar groups huddled in this office, waiting to hear their fate from Sterling. But this time was different. "Please come in," she said, moving around the desk to greet them properly. "And yes, your jobs are absolutely secure." Lisa, a young coordinator Rose had watched rise through the ranks, stepped forward. We can't believe what happened. All these years you were cleaning our offices and we never knew." "That was the point," Rose said gently. "I needed to see how this company really worked. Not just the fancy meetings and public statements, but the daily choices that showed its true character." She perched on the edge of the desk, a habit she picked up from watching countless executives try to appear casual during tense conversations. "But why?" asked Robert from accounting. "Why spend 15 years as a cleaner when you had the power to walk in here any time?" Rose thought about all the conversations she'd overheard, all the late-night meetings she'd witnessed while pushing her cleaning cart. Because real change doesn't come from making demands from the top. It comes from understanding the heart of a problem. And the heart of Sterling Communications' problem wasn't just in the boardroom, it was in every ignored greeting, every dismissed suggestion, every qualified candidate passed over because they didn't fit the culture. The office fell quiet. Through the window, Rose could see the cleaning staff starting their evening rounds. She'd already spoken to them, assured them their jobs were secure, promised better wages and benefits. They were family, after all. "So what happens now?" Lisa asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Rose walked to the whiteboard where Sterling had mapped out his plans for outsourcing their jobs. She erased it with one swipe. Now we rebuild. Not just the organizational chart, but the whole culture. And we start by listening to the voices that have been ignored for too long. She outlined her immediate plans, maintaining all current positions in the Minority Outreach Division, implementing new diversity initiatives, creating mentorship programs. But more importantly, she talked about changing how decisions were made, about bringing different perspectives into every level of leadership. As the group left her office, visibly relieved and actually smiling, Betty handed Rose another stack of papers. The press is still waiting downstairs. They want to know how you pulled this off. Rose looked at her reflection in the window, remembering all the times she'd seen it there while cleaning. Tell them the truth. Tell them I spent 15 years being invisible, watching a company treat people like numbers on a spreadsheet. Tell them I decided to prove that the power to change things doesn't always come from where you'd expect. Her phone buzzed, a message from her daughter. You're all over the news, Mom. So proud of you. Rose smiled, thinking of all the lessons she'd taught her children about patience, persistence, and dignity. Today, she'd shown them what those words really meant. A commotion outside caught her attention. The evening cleaning crew had arrived on the executive floor, pushing their carts past surprised office workers who, for the first time, were really singing them. Some were even stopping to say hello. You know, Betty said, watching the scene, Sterling always talked about leaving a legacy. I don't think this is what he had in mind. Betty gathered her papers, a smile playing at her lips. You know, when this is over, they're going to ask why you did it this way. Why spend 15 years as a cleaning lady when you were wealthy enough to walk in the front door? Rose walked her friend to the door, pausing to straighten a family photo on the wall. Her daughter's college graduation, her son's first day as a teacher, her husband's retirement party from the fire department. Because real change doesn't come from the front door, Betty. It comes from the inside, from the places and people that others overlook. As her lawyer left, Rose returned to her office. She had 2 weeks to prepare for the biggest meeting of her life. 2 weeks to make sure every detail was perfect. She picked up her cleaning company uniform, hanging ready for tonight's shift. Soon, very soon, it would be the last time she'd need to wear it at Sterling Communications. But for now, she had work to do. Both kinds of work. After all, the offices still needed cleaning, and Rose Washington had never been one to leave a job unfinished. The early morning sun filled Rose's home office with golden light as she sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of carefully organized documents. This was her real workplace, not the cleaning cart she pushed around Sterling Communications, but a sleek modern office in her Brooklyn brownstone. The wall behind her displayed her Howard University MBA diploma alongside financial certificates and business licenses. Her lawyer, Mrs. Chen, sat across from her, reviewing the recordings from last night's board meeting. The older woman's face grew increasingly grim as she listened. They'd really have no idea who you are, do they? She asked, removing her reading glasses. Rose smiled, pulling up a spreadsheet on her computer. That's exactly how I wanted it, Betty. When people think you're invisible, they show you who they really are. She turned the screen so her lawyer could see the numbers. Washington Enterprises now owns 28% of Sterling Communications. We've been buying shares through different subsidiaries for 10 years. Betty let out a low whistle as she studied the data. Shell companies, investment groups, overseas holdings. Rose, this is brilliant. They never connected the dots because they never thought to look for a connection. People see what they expect to see, Rose said, standing to pour them both fresh coffee. Her cup read World's Best Mom, a gift from her daughter who was now finishing medical school. To them, I'm just the cleaning lady. They don't notice when I'm in the room during their private conversations. They don't think twice about leaving sensitive documents on their desks while I clean. She walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where she'd grown up. The corner store where she bought penny candy as a kid was now an organic market. Times changed, but people stayed pretty much the same. My father was a janitor, Rose continued, her voice soft with memory. He used to tell me that the best way to learn about people was to watch how they act when they think nobody's looking. For 15 years, I've watched Sterling and his board. I've seen how they treat people they think are beneath them, how they make decisions that hurt families just to add a few points to their profit margins. Betty shuffled through more papers on the desk. The evidence you've gathered is substantial. Discrimination, insider trading, environmental violations. They've gotten careless because they thought nobody was watching. Rose returned to her desk, picking up a photo of her parents. They'd both worked multiple jobs to put her through college, taught her the value of hard work and patience. When I started this company, everyone told me to stay small. Stick to cleaning, they said. Know your place. But my parents didn't work themselves to the bone so I could stay in my place. She opened her laptop, pulling up more files. Every time Sterling rejected a qualified candidate because they didn't fit the company culture, I documented it. Every time they passed over someone for promotion because they weren't executive material, I saved the evidence. Every racist joke, every discriminatory policy, every shady deal, it's all here. The room fell quiet except for the distant sounds of city traffic. Betty studied her client of 10 years with newfound appreciation. You've been playing chess while they've been playing checkers. More like they've been playing checkers while assuming I couldn't even understand the game, Rose corrected, a hint of steel in her voice. The shareholders' meeting is in 2 weeks. Sterling's going to announce his plan to outsource the minority outreach division. 300 families will lose their livelihoods because a group of rich men want bigger bonuses. She pressed a button on her phone, and her assistant's voice came through the speaker. Yes, Mrs. Washington. Lisa, please confirm my appointments for today, and make sure the documents we discussed are ready for the SEC filing. Already done, Mrs. Washington. Your first meeting is at 10 a.m. with the minority shareholders group. Rose thanked her and ended the call. She turned to Betty, her expression determined. For years, they've seen me as nothing but a cleaning lady. It's time they learned that I've been cleaning up more than just their offices. The security guard nodded goodbye as she left, probably the only person in the building who bothered to acknowledge her presence. Good night, Miss Rose, he said with a smile. Good night, Charlie, she replied, her voice steady despite the fire burning inside her. Something tells me tomorrow's going to be a very interesting day. The rain tapped gently against the conference room windows as Rose pushed her cart down the dimly lit hallway. It was a dreary Tuesday evening, the kind that made everyone leave the office a little earlier than usual. Everyone except the board members, who had been locked in their monthly meeting for the past 3 hours. Rose normally avoided cleaning near the conference room during these meetings. She'd learned years ago that her presence made some executives uncomfortable. They'd pause their conversations or lower their voices until she left. But tonight, something felt different. The voices from behind the heavy door were louder than usual, heated with emotion that even the thick walls couldn't contain. As she bent down to empty the trash bin just outside the conference room, James Sterling I's voice cut through the door like a knife. Look, the minority outreach division is dragging down our quarterly numbers. We can outsource the whole thing to a firm in Singapore for half the cost. Rose's hand froze mid-motion. The minority outreach division employed over 300 people, many of whom she'd watched grow from fresh-faced interns to accomplished professionals. She'd cleaned their cubicles, seen their family photos, watched them celebrate promotions and birthdays. What about the diversity initiatives we promised the shareholders? A woman's voice asked, probably Linda Chen, the only female board member. Please, Sterling scoffed, and Rose could practically hear him waving his hand dismissively. We'll release a nice press statement about restructuring for efficiency. Throw in some buzzwords about global integration. The media will forget about it in a week. Someone else chuckled. Rose recognized the throaty laugh of Thomas Wheeler, the CFO. Besides, who's going to question it? Our biggest individual shareholder is some investment group nobody's ever heard of. They never even show up to meetings. Rose allowed herself a small smile at that. Little did they know that Washington Enterprises representative at shareholders' meetings was actually there, just wearing a cleaning uniform instead of a business suit. The severance packages will be minimal, Sterling continued, his voice taking on that smooth, practiced tone he used in TV interviews. Most of these people should be grateful they had jobs here at all. I mean, have you seen the resumes we get from those community outreach programs? Half of them can barely string together a proper sentence. A chorus of laughter followed his words, echoing off the conference room walls. Rose straightened up slowly, her joints stiff from more than just the evening's work. She'd heard comments like these before, whispered in corners or muttered under breath. But there was something different about hearing them spoken so boldly, so shamelessly, in a room full of people who controlled hundreds of lives. She pulled out her phone and pressed record, a habit she'd developed years ago after realizing that knowledge was power and evidence was everything. The conversation continued, growing more candid as the evening wore on. They discussed which employees to cut first, joked about diversity hires, and planned how to spin the story to the media. Outside the windows, the city lights blurred in the rain, creating halos of color in the darkness. Rose thought about Maria in accounting, who'd just bought her first house, about David in creative, whose daughter had just started college, about all the people who came to work every day, giving their best to a company that saw them as nothing but numbers on a spreadsheet. As she moved her cart down the hall, she could still hear Sterling's voice, now discussing profit projections with the enthusiasm of someone planning a vacation. Rose pulled out another phone from her pocket, her business phone, and sent a quick text to her lawyer. Meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. Bring the papers. For 15 years, she had cleaned these offices, gathering information, building evidence, and waiting for the right moment. She'd watched Sterling and his board make decisions that hurt people, always from the shadows, always staying quiet. But sometimes staying quiet wasn't the same as staying passive. She finished her rounds, methodically cleaning each office, each desk, each window. To anyone watching, she was just doing her job, same as any other night. But inside, her mind was racing with plans and possibilities. The shareholders' meeting was in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prepare, to organize, to make sure everything was perfect. As she packed up her supplies for the night, Rose paused by the wall of achievements in the lobby. Soon, there would be changes in this building. Big changes. And for once, she wouldn't be just watching from the sidelines. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as Rose Washington moved quietly through the empty hallways of Sterling Communications. It was nearly 8 p.m., and most employees had already left for the day. A few desk lamps still glowed in the distance, where some junior executives worked late, hoping to impress their bosses. Rose knew their names, their habits, and their stories, even though they barely noticed her existence. For 15 years, she had cleaned these offices, watching the drama of corporate life unfold before her. She was like a ghost in their world, present but unseen, heard but ignored. Tonight, like every night, she pushed her cleaning cart past the wall of achievements in the main lobby. Awards for excellence in public relations gleamed behind pristine glass, catching the dim evening light. Rose paused for a moment, her reflection mingling with the golden plaques. Few would guess that the woman in the simple blue uniform had an MBA from Howard University, or that she owned the very cleaning company contracted to maintain these prestigious offices. As she emptied the trash bin near the CEO's office, she could hear James Sterling I's booming voice through the thick wooden door. He was probably on another late-night video call with the West Coast team. Rose had cleaned his office countless times while he sat there, talking on his phone as if she were merely part of the furniture. She'd seen the family photos on his desk change over the years, his children growing up, family vacations in the Hamptons, charity galas where he posed with celebrities. The corner of her mouth turned up slightly as she thought about her own photos, safely tucked away in her home office. Photos of her signing business contracts, attending shareholder meetings in disguise, and carefully building her empire piece by piece. While Sterling and his board saw a cleaning lady, the financial world knew her company, Washington Enterprises, as a rising force in corporate investment. Moving through the cubicle farm, Rose straightened a crooked nameplate here, adjusted a fallen sticky note there. Small acts of kindness that went unnoticed but made someone's morning just a little bit better. She'd learned early on that true power wasn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was about patience, observation, and understanding the small details that others overlooked. Near the break room, she heard laughter. A group of mid-level managers were having a late dinner, takeout containers spread across the table. As she walked past, their voices hushed momentarily before resuming, a little more subdued. Rose pretended not to notice, just as she pretended not to notice when they left their mess for her to clean up, assuming it was her job. What they didn't know was that Rose owned more than just a cleaning company. Over the past decade, she had carefully orchestrated the purchase of Sterling Communications stock through various subsidiaries of Washington Enterprises. Share by share, year by year, She had acquired a 28% stake in the company, making her the largest individual shareholder. As she wiped down the conference room windows, Rose caught her reflection again. At 52, she stood straight and proud, her gray-streaked hair pulled back neatly, her uniform crisp and clean. Her mother had always told her to carry herself with dignity no matter what work she was doing. Success, she'd say, is about playing the long game. And Rose had been playing very patiently indeed. She checked her watch. Almost time for her evening ritual. Every night, after cleaning the executive floor, she would take a moment in the empty conference room to look out over the city lights of New York. From the 47th floor, the view was spectacular, and it reminded her of how far she'd come from the small apartment in Brooklyn where she'd grown up. She allowed herself a small smile as she thought about the upcoming shareholders' meeting. Soon, very soon, everyone would learn that the invisible woman they'd ignored for so long had been watching, learning, and building power right under their noses. But for now, she had floors to mop and bins to empty. After all, real power wasn't about showing off. It was about knowing when to reveal your strength. Picking up her cleaning supplies, Rose moved on to the next office. Tomorrow would be another day of being invisible. But that was okay. She had learned long ago that sometimes the best place to hide was in plain sight.